Hi everyone and welcome to the Jeff Buller Show. Today I have with me Artin Nazarian. Now Artin has quite a story. It started as a refugee that left Iran, went to Madrid, Spain, and then got his green card, the family did, and moved to the USA. And today he is now a senior executive at Disney in Los Angeles. So welcome to the show. Artin, it's a pleasure to have you here.
No, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Now, another thing about Artin that I didn't mention was that he is the author of the book called Side Adventure, which is self-published and is coming out in the next week or two. I think it is actually next week, April 22.
That's
So,
correct.
so we're going to have a chat about that because it's a topic that's dear to my own heart. It's essentially about I suppose, getting inspired to start a side hustle while you keep your day job. And we're going to have a little chat about that because that's certainly what happened to me in the past. So we'll have a chat about that. So, Artin, it's been, in reading your story, it's certainly quite inspiring. And can you tell us how it all started? You were born in Iran. Which part of Iran were you born in?
Yeah, I was born in Tehran, the capital city.
Yep.
I am a Christian Armenian, as everyone knows. Iran is a Muslim country, so Armenians kind of got distributed in that Middle East area because of the Armenian genocide. That's kind of where my ancestral folks went, and then my parents were born there, my grandparents were born there, and once the regime changed in Iran in 1979. Things changed a lot for Christian minorities there. My parents didn't feel that it was the right place to raise kids. At the same time, the Iran-Iraq war started. So through all the 80s, we were watching bombs drop around the city.
Wow.
It wasn't, what people might remember as Desert Storm, where it's, missile guided, laser guided missiles hitting specific targets. This was very primitive. It was just planes flying over civilians and just dropping bombs. And it had become kind of a show for people. I clearly remember you would hear the sirens go off. That was an indicator that there's Iraqi planes. And people literally would go on roofs to watch the fireworks because the anti-aircraft missiles look like fireworks. So that's where people would go to watch it. And every window had these X tapes on them to kind of prevent glass shatter to kind of explode out if the bomb was dropped nearby. It was a bizarre situation that most people, when I talk about, have a hard time relating to in the US, because almost nobody went through that unless you were living in that same region at the same time and at the same refugee path as I did.
Yeah, so you left there when you were about 8 or 9, and
Yeah, I was eight, about nine when we left the country. So another story that I recently heard from my dad was our plane actually got hit by some missile. I don't exactly know what. So the entire flight from Tehran to Madrid, there was only one engine. My dad kept that for my mom because he knew she's going to freak out. Until very recently is when he told us about the story, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, that must have been a horrendous flight for him, knowing what he knew and didn't share.
wow. So, so you got hit, the plane got hit and took one engine out, and the pilot decided to keep going.
Yeah, kept going. I believe I could be wrong, but I believe it was a jumbo jet, 4 engines. So I was
Right.
able to fly with the 3 engines though.
Okay. Yeah, that's good having 4 engines sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of spares.
Yeah. Uh, I think a lot of them are moving to just 2 engines these days. I think, but I'm pretty sure most of them can fly on one any rate. I think still. So, but yeah,
Probably.
yeah, 4 gives you better odds, I think.
Yeah. Especially then takeoff. Once you're up, probably you don't need as many.
Yeah. So then you went to Madrid, and you learnt
Yeah,
you learnt to speak Spanish.
I did. We landed in Madrid, and I was thrown into fourth grade elementary school, speaking no Spanish, only speaking Armenian and Farsi at the time. But I was a naive 9-year-old. I had no issues. I mingled with everybody, and eventually, and fairly quickly, spoke Spanish really well. And I remember that to kind of make friends there, I started drawing for the kids. I always had a knack for drawing animation type characters. So all of a sudden, the kids at the school would ask me to draw, ironically, a lot of Disney characters, Mickey Mouse and Goofy. So I started drawing those as a way to make friends. And it soon became a way to make some side money, because little kids were paying me a few pennies at the time to draw for them. So it just became candy money, but it was a little side business. My first entrepreneurial business was drawing for kids.
Well, were you drawing cartoons?
Yeah, it was mainly Mickey Mouse's, Snoopy characters, very much animated type characters. I do remember one kid asking me to draw Arnold Schwarzenegger and giving me a picture of him, kind of bodybuilding and drawing that. That was the only real human thing that I drew. And most of the time it was Snoopy or Mickey or Goofy.
And strange that you ended up at Disney.
I know, it's very ironic. I mean, it kind of what led me to decide to go to film school. Since I had that, drawing in me, it kind of said, I'm not sure if animation is the place for me, but filmmaking might be. So once we eventually got our green card from Madrid in Spain, we moved to Los Angeles, a suburb called Glendale, California. And elementary school here, and then eventually high school, and I decided to go to film school. Obviously in LA, that's what you see a lot, the glitz and glamour of the industry. So that kind of what drew me to it. What was interesting at the same time, Glendale, California, for the audience that doesn't know, it's probably has the second largest concentration of Armenians outside of Armenia. Right. Somehow it turned out that that's a lot of Armenians immigrated to out of all the Armenian neighboring cities. So when I came to Glendale in elementary school, there was a lot of Armenians, but because it's Los Angeles, there was also a lot of Latin American kids, from Mexico or other neighboring countries. And I became a Armenian boy that was translating English to Spanish for the Mexican kids that had just come to LA. It was this really bizarre situation I was in, as a translator. But it was an interesting thing. I made a lot of friends doing it.
Because there'd be a lot of Spanish speaking in LA, wouldn't there?
There is a lot. It's a heavy Spanish speaking population.
Yeah. So you went to film school. What film school did you go to? And
I went to a local university in LA. And the glitz and glamour is what drew me to it. But once I started film studies, because the first couple of years it's all general education, chemistry, I don't know why I was taking it, or complex math, I don't know why I was taking it, but eventually got through those and got to the film studies. And I soon realized that, the glitz and glamour was probably the wrong reason I was drawn to the film industry. The creation of something is what I was drawn to. Just like how I like drawing, how I like making a film that actually can last forever. That's what I was drawn to. So that was a big realization for me. And probably when I was 19 or 20 when I realized that. And as film school kind of continued, and my senior year, in order to graduate, the requirement was you either have to make your own short film or have a leading behind the camera role in somebody else's short film. And the school provided grants to 5 projects, and it was a $5,000 grant. So luckily mine was selected, but I needed about $10,000 to make the movie. And we're talking year 2000. So there was no digital. We were shooting film, unfortunately. I wish I was doing that now because it's technology is so much better. So I had to find a way to raise the other $5,000. And that's kind of where my entrepreneurship kind of kicked in. And I figured, what do all film school students want? Well, they want their project to be seen, to maybe have that break that Steven Spielberg or Lucas had. It's that famous film school project that kicked off their career. So I decided, you know what, let's do a film showcase, a film festival. So I came up with a film festival brand, put posters up everywhere. I was an intern at Sony at the time. So I agreed one of the executives to be a judge on there. And shortly after, these checks started arriving at my house. And my parents are opening up these $40, $50 checks, asking me, what is going on? Why are these checks showing up? Like, don't worry about it. It's all legal. I'm not doing anything wrong here. Anyways, cut the story short, I ended up raising the other $5,000 doing a film festival. And the executive at Sony was a judge. Their films got seen by an executive. So it was all legit, but nobody knew I was behind it. And I had kids at school come up to me and ask me, are you going to enter the film school? I'm like, yeah, maybe I will. But it was in a way I raised that money to make the movie. And once the film was produced, a handful of them got selected to be screened at the Academy theaters. And again, luckily mine was one of them. And that night at the theater is kind of where I had my next aha moment. Mm-hmm. I was sitting in a chair, big lights go down, my name comes up on screen, written and directed by Artin Nazarian. I looked to my left, my parents were sitting there, and the smile on their face, I will never get out of my head. And that's when I realized it's true that I was drawn to the film industry because of the creation things, not the glitz and glamour. Yeah. But actually, I was more drawn to it because it was my way to make my parents proud. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized that making my parents proud is the emotion that I was after. So whether it's making a movie or writing a book, which I have a copy of here, right? Writing a book or doing a startup, it's all about what do I do to make my parents proud. And once I realized that, I felt there was a lot of weight lifted off my shoulder because I realized becoming the next Steven Spielberg was not my only route. So, becoming a famous lawyer was not my only. There was a lot of ways that I could still feel that emotion of making my parents proud. And that was a big aha moment for me, realizing that as humans, we're all searching for an emotion. Sometimes we call it happiness, but there's other emotions that we're always seeking. And sometimes we identify them early in our lives. Sometimes we figure it out later in our life. But it's that emotion that we all strive for. Mm.
Yeah, it's people think happiness is a destination, but it's more a journey, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's an adventure.
Yeah, I was watching George Lucas being interviewed because he was inspired to structure his creative pursuits using Joseph Campbell's hero's story journey arc, hero's journey, and he said that for him. The joy is not just in the doing. It's not the end result, or it's not being passionate about one thing. It's about being passionate about the process. And he said, and you can see that, with him, is that it goes right from the idea through to the creation, through to the publishing and the marketing. And I'm sure he gets a big buzz out of creating all these fantastic movies. But he said, you got to be in love with the process as well, which I found fascinating. It's not just being in love with what you have a passionate purpose, and that's one thing. It's being passionate and enjoying the journey. So I went, wow, that was quite insightful for me. I just heard him say that recently when he was interviewed in about 1993 by Bill Moyers, who interviewed Joseph Campbell before he died in 1987, I think it was. So I'm a little bit of a Joseph Campbell fanboy, so the story arc is something, the hero's journey for me is... And then hearing Joseph Campbell talk about the myths and legends of the world over the millennia, and then the common threads that tie humans together, and he's sort of put a structure to it, which and you can just see his passion about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I 100% agree with you and with Mr. Lucas. The core message of the book is that you're one idea away from happiness. That's kind of what it's all based around. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your idea is going to be successful. It's about that journey to bring that idea to life, which is going to bring happiness to you, because at the end of the day, professionally speaking, your happiness is directly tied to your feeling of growth. And if you're working for someone else, whether it's a small company or a corporate world, sometimes your growth is limited by what they can do, not because they don't like you, but there's budgets and other things to account for. Not everybody can get promoted. So the only way to take control of your growth is to pursue your own ideas. And whether they become reality or not, it doesn't matter, because through that journey is when you figure out what truly makes you happy. Maybe you're in the wrong role. Maybe you're in operations, but you enjoy marketing. And that's what allows you to make that change. But that journey is so important.
Yeah. And I suppose your aha moment, from where you saw your creation made your parents proud, and that brought happiness to you, just that emotion. So you made the movie. Obviously, you're not George Lucas at the moment.
No,
that's absolutely fine. None of us, we're all individuals. When I grow up, I want to be someone else is certainly not the way to think about life. So when I grow up, I want to be me. I think that's certainly what we need to strive for. And discovering who that me is very important. So you obviously got to finish your film school career, and then you're doing the intern at Sony. So how'd you get to have a career at Disney?
So once I was out of film school, it was a little difficult, finding the right place to land, or trying to figure out, okay, I have some ideas to write movies, but how do you even get it sold? So luckily, I had a close friend of mine, who's still a close friend of mine. We were working at Macy's, a department store in Los Angeles, Macy's Women's Shoes department together. And this is about a year after graduation, this lady comes to the shoe department. He's selling the shoe to her. I'm standing next to him. She hands him a credit card, and we can see the Disney castle on there. So we asked, you work at Disney? She says, yeah, oh, yeah. Well, where do you work? What do you do? Well, the world. What does that even mean? My role is to release VHS and DVDs. Obviously not a lot of people buy VHSs these days, and DVDs are starting to go obsolete, but 17, 18 years ago, that was the big thing. We ended up passing our resume, and shortly after, we both got called in. And that's kind of how we started at Disney together. It was a department that was considered post-production, because it was distribution more than anything else. It's how do you get the finished movie to the hands of consumers. And at the time, it was not digital; it was hard product. And we soon, both of us, my friend Michael, we soon realized that this is not what we want to do. We didn't sign up for distributing DVDs. We want to be filmmakers. What happened to that dream?
Right.
So we started, writing scripts and trying to make short films and music videos and commercials, kind of honing our skill as much as we can. But it's so true when they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And especially in the film industry, it's so hard to get financing for a movie just because it's such a risky investment. People don't want to put money into that. That's when I started looking around and noticing, post.com bubble, there's a lot of money going into technology. Maybe I should give that a try. And that's where I started kind of reverting back to my entrepreneurial spirit and learning how software development works and how do software products work.
Yep.
I started with huge failures, not understanding why are my friends not giving me money to put this great idea into motion. And after a few failures, starting in 2004 until 2000, probably 9, one failure after another. But I never look at failures as failures. They're always learning opportunities for me. So as I learned and grew, in parallel to growing at Disney and being promoted fairly quickly to becoming an executive, I landed my first big investment, and we were able to raise $4 million and build a hospitality software company to support restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. And that kind of became the big side adventure that I write about in my book. Eventually, that got acquired, and then I wanted to do the next one. Like, I'm itching. I can't just sit around. I've built habits that allow me to not only have a successful career at Disney, but also do things on the side. I have a lot of time on my hand. What do I do? So I wanted to do the next startup. I was thinking about what problem can I solve? And I was brainstorming, eventually build a prototype for a product called Efficient. And it was a problem that I was noticing in the corporate world that I was trying to solve, which was a lot of team kind of working in isolation with each other. And maybe team A is very busy, but team B has a lot of downtime. So how do you leverage folks from team B to assist team A? Right now, it's a very difficult problem to solve. And that's kind of what I was trying to solve. But then my wife got pregnant. So I was like, okay, I want to be a very present and active dad. Right. I'm not sure if pursuing a startup is going to allow me to do that. Let's put that on hold. But again, I couldn't just sit there. So I thought to myself, I've been wanting to write a book for years. This is my perfect opportunity. I have a lot of knowledge and teachings that I can now finally teach in this book. And that could be my next startup, doing a book on the side. And that's kind of was the genesis of the idea of writing this book. And it took about 2.5 years to write the book, about a year longer than I originally planned. But what you don't know as a first-time author. But I eventually finished it.
Well, congratulations on getting it finished. That's great achievement on its own. So were you, these startups you worked on, were you working at Disney and it was just side adventures while you're at Disney?
Yeah, they were all kind of side gigs or side hustles. I call them side ventures because they were just, especially when you raise $4 million, it's not a side gig anymore. It's not a side hustle. There's some serious money and some serious investors involved that are holding you accountable. So I call them side ventures. And that's why the book is called A Side Adventure. Because when you pursue a side venture, it's an adventure. I mean, it takes you on a journey that you never thought you'll go on. Yeah. So yeah, it was all on the side.
So let's have a little dive into the book. You've mentioned 5 pillars, 5 steps. Number 1, get inspired. Number 2, leverage. Number 3, add value. Number 4, identify. And number 5, move. So let's look at each stage or each pillar, if you like. So let's look at the side adventure structure for your book. So get inspired. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, the inspire part is my story. I don't come from a well-off family. I know that I'm not a unique story. So I'm hoping that my story and how I was able to find kind of what I want to do and what emotion drives me. And that story, hopefully it inspires others to say, I can do it too. I don't have to have a family that can give me $100,000. I don't need to go to Harvard or MIT or a prestigious school. I don't need to know people that are at these prestigious schools. I could do it as long as I'm resourceful and I have drive. And I'm hoping that story of mine inspires others to say, I could do this too. And that's kind of how the book starts, is my story around it and hoping to inspire.
Okay. And step number two,
And then
leverage.
Yeah, and the leverage comes from, well, if you are working at a job, whether it's corporate world, small company, a small business, whatever it is, there's a huge opportunity there to learn. So instead of just being stuck in whatever role HR has told you you need to play, or whatever role you've been given, step outside of that role and take initiative to learn other disciplines or other things that are going on in that organization. So, I took the initiatives I wanted to understand, how does Disney marketing work? How does the tech team work? How does sales process work? What systems are involved? So I completely stepped out of my boundaries and try to understand, how do things work? Because in the back of my mind, I knew at some point I want to do all this on my own. So why not learn from people that have been doing it for years? And that's kind of where the leverage comes into play. Just leverage your position at a job to do more than what you're being paid for.
Okay, that's a great bit of advice. A lot of people sort of just say, this is my job, I'm not going to do anything outside it because that's all I'm paid for. Whereas you're taking a much bigger view, which is leads to the third step, which is add value.
Yep. And that's kind of where it came from too. Once you start learning other areas, you're able to identify problems that you might not have seen before. And that's the easiest way to get promoted, especially in a large organization, is solving problems. Because senior level management looking to promote people are looking for those folks that can solve big problems that adds value to the company, whether it's to the bottom line, whether it's adding revenue, whatever the problem is, somehow it's adding value. So once you understand how a broader organization works, it's easier to identify problems. And I will never forget, an early mentor of mine told me, the bigger the organization, the more problems there are. So just find the problem and solve it, and then make sure you put a spotlight on that problem to kind of self-market yourself. So it's you're not just solving a problem in your own bubble and nobody finds out about it. So be, a little diplomatic and creative around how do you get attention on yourself without kind of coming across as not humble, but just, tap on the shoulder. I did this. Yeah. And that's kind of the aspect of adding value. And as you also learn other disciplines and how it works, networking comes into play too. Because now you're able to network with other executives to understand what their problems are. But that helps your self-brand, your personal brand. And when your name is in front of the decision makers, and when there's somebody deciding, well, we have 5 candidates that can be promoted, but we can only give 2 promotions. Well, when your brand image is higher than somebody else's, you probably will get a higher chance of getting the promotion than others. So it also helps your brand image as you network across the organization.
Right. So after that's basically doing a bit of self-promotion is important. Some people aren't comfortable with that, and some cultures aren't comfortable with that. But make yourself visible, I suppose, is part of that. And it doesn't have to be talking about yourself too much. It's just create visibility for yourself and make sure that the success is attributed to you. So, number 4, identify. So what do you mean by identify?
So there's a few things to identify. One is identifying problems that you can solve. That's on your job side. But then personally, identifying if you actually have the right puzzle pieces in place to pursue a side venture. As an example, if you have a lot of credit card debt and you're not financially stable, you should not be attempting a side venture just because you have a lot of other things to deal with. So, I talk through around the book about how to understand you're ready financially to take this step. There's also the relationship aspect of things. You need to make sure that if you're married or in a relationship, that's set up correctly, and you have communications in the right way to establish that expectation around, hey, I might be working a little more at nights. How do we not have less time, but let's have more quality time together? If you're a parent, similar thing, with your kids, that conversation of, dad or mom is going to attempt this thing at night. So let's have more vacations and less time together. It's just about setting expectations. And that's, once you have those relationship aspect in place, your financials in place, and your job in place in the right way. So you have autonomy and promoted to the right level, and you position yourself under the right leader, because that's very important too. The right leader at your job will actually elevate you. The wrong leader will push you down. So and kind of moving and maneuvering yourself to be under the right leader. Once you have those pieces in place, you're in a very good place to pursue a side venture, and your percentage of success goes up.
So that's number 5. So once you've identified, is the next last step is to move, whether it's I suppose take it from a side adventure to a main adventure, I suppose, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it's taking it from the idea, just that what's in your head, to now actually validating that idea, because just because you think it's a great idea, it might not be. So before you actually go down the path of spending money and building that product, validate the idea. And I talk about steps on how to actually validate the idea in a cheap way, and then building that skill of validating an idea fairly quickly for future ideas, and then moving it into a prototype, and how to build a prototype that continues to further validate the problem you're trying to solve. And each step of the way, it's about getting feedback, whether it's actual customer feedback or potential customer feedback. It's constantly getting feedback to make sure that you're on the right track, but just focus on the problem, not on the idea, because usually the idea is going to change. But if you focus on the problem you're trying to solve, you'll eventually solve that problem. It might not be how you thought you were going to solve it, but that feedback will guide you onto the better way to solve it. And that's all about the path of validation, prototype, feedback, and launch. And then once you launch, marketing, branding, and sales comes into place, and actually trying to generate revenue.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to seeing the book come out on April 22. And it's called Side Adventure. And it's by Artin Nazarian, who has shared some of his insights and journey with us today, which has been fantastic. Is there any sort of final thoughts you'd like to leave for our listeners and viewers here, Artin?
Just that, one promotional plug is that the week of the launch of the book, the ebook will be 99 cents in the US and equivalent to that globally. Mm-hmm. So really trying to get as many people to put their eyes on the book. And then from a final thought perspective, just don't be scared to pursue your idea. I think fear holds people back, mm-hmm. and the fear of the unknown, or the fear of how do I do this? As long as you take one step forward and think about it as a marathon and not a sprint, and just think about each day going one step forward, you'll eventually build so much momentum that it's hard to now say, I'm gonna quit. You just can't quit anymore because you've built so much momentum that you're moving forward. So just think about it as a marathon and build that momentum, and don't stop.
I think that's great advice, Artin. I look forward to seeing the book come out on April 22. It's on Amazon. You can buy it in a range of formats, both print and Kindle, I believe. So thank you very much for your time, Artin. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to reading the book myself.
Yeah, pleasure's mine. Thank you so much for having me.